All right, so we're talking .com bust. I think that like the bust has been kind of on the mind because Adam, you've obviously been seeing all of these various threads about people warning of the fact that winter has arrived.
Absolutely, I mean, and arriving very quickly. I think the starkest of them being VCs like a month ago, all in on Web3, and then 20 minutes ago apologizing to LPs, like that kind of about face.
It feels pretty quick. It does feel pretty quick, and I feel like one of the things that I certainly felt during the bust is that once things turn, they turn way faster than you thought they could. At least that was my recollection. It went on much longer. I felt this way about the housing bubble too. These bubbles go on way longer than you think they should, but when they actually turn, they turn way, way, way faster than you thought they possibly could.
So I totally agreed on that. But I also think that the denial persists a surprising amount of time. I want to get into more of this, but definitely when I joined Sun and the stock was like at not that like $10, everybody said, well, there's only one way it can go from here. And they were right.
Okay. They were right. They were right.
In a sense.
There is only one direction it can go from here. The problem is it is the wrong direction.
That's right.
Okay, did you hear the picks and shovels thing at Sun? I feel like we said that a lot. I heard that a lot, certainly.
Yes. I mean, this is a phrase that really rings a bell, but help me out.
So this was an old like gold rush. I don't even know if this is even true. But one of the things that felt like it was repeated a lot during the boom was an analogy to the gold rush in that the companies that made money in the gold rush were those that were selling picks and shovels. I guess Levi's famously made a lot of money in the gold rush. Like, again, I would like this could all be checked. This was kind of I would love to know how much of this is actually true. I mean, like what shovel magnate came out of the gold rush? Just remind me. I mean, so like what massive American picks and shovels enterprise came out of the gold rush?
Any major town has the old pick and shovel library standing at the center of town, right?
Right. The old, and actually, so amusingly, sadly, I actually somewhat know
pick and shovel university.
Right. I somewhat know the answer to this question because building the Transcontinental Railroad, which is after the gold rush, 1869, one of the lions of the Transcontinental Railroad is a guy named Oakes Ames, who actually was a shovel magnate. So I mean, these people do exist. The only reason I remember this is Bain had a very good book. I think David Bain has an excellent book on the Transcontinental Railroad. The Oakes Ames is known, and Adam, you're going to love this. All these barons have these kind of, these monikers by which they are known, and he is known as the King of Spades. How awesome is that?
Oh, makes me want to become
right, exactly. Makes you want to become a shovel magnet. So other than Oakes Ames, so it's like, okay, fine, he built a transcontinental railroad. But yes, exactly. Like there's no picks and shovels library. They are, and of course, like you didn't take this apart because you want to keep believing. So you're like, oh yeah, picks and shovels. Like we're Levi's. We're not. It's like no dummies. Like no gold rush, no anything else. And I felt like, yes, there was that period of denial, Adam, which...
And in particular, I mean, this referred to Sun machines being prolific in these .coms, right? That they would buy tons of them, in many cases, many, many more than they could ever use.
Yes. And so for me, the example of this was boo.com, which... I remember getting in giggle fits as we were talking about boot.com because we had a file called boot.conf and we just thought, anyway, it was that you had to be there.
You had to be there, right?
Or maybe not. Anyway, boot.com was a big Sun customer and they had an E10K, a galactic machine with exactly one CPU board in it. It's like, this is not a good sign. This is a person this is a very good salesperson, but this company has it. And boo.com was a very early flameout. I want to say like maybe March or April of 2000. So let's do actually chronology a little bit, Adam, because I think that, and again, we want to hear from other folks that were kind of around this period of time. But I started working for Sun in '96. So I feel that like the starting pistol for the boom has got to be like Netscape, I would say, in '95. I don't know. What do you think? I know I'm reaching back to your kind of high school years.
No, that's right. I don't know. I feel like the real go-go days maybe weren't until 97, 98. But I realized that this is, a rewriting of history. But like the time when it just, so my lens for that is, I started college in 1997, and there was certainly excitement, but as my TAs and the folks ahead of me were graduating, it was very, very frothy. But in again 98, 99, and maybe that's just I didn't see it quite as much in like 97.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think it was definitely building. I mean, 98, 99, 2000 is definitely the height. But I think that run up kind of starts. You have a recession in 91. So the economy is kind of, and I remember when I went to school in 1992, being kind of relieved with computer science. I'm like, well, this will be, at least I will have a job, because I had so many friends who were several years ahead of me who were graduating and not able to find any job at all in 91, 92.
That's why I went to grad.
Right, there you go. Right, and always a good option when the economy sours. So things are kind of slowly building over the 90s. And Adam, you interned for Sun in 2000. Is that right? The summer 2000?
That's right. Summer of 2000.
So which we're at or near the height.
Yeah, I mean, undeniably, like you're right, at or near the peak of hype there and of valuations.
Okay, so what is some of the largest that you remember from 2000?
Okay, so first of all, this bit me hard in a weird way. So I joined Sun as an intern with my buddy Pete Demaray, who I think is now at Meta. He was at Oculus.
I love Pete.
We could not put a roof over our heads. Okay, so like lots of other interns were given housing, we were not. We tried to get it on our own, and of course there were. I mean, talk about picks and shovels, right? We could not get housed. My buddy John Motor, who responds to this thread, was like between apartments, so he let us crash at his place for like that interstitial month. But we spent the better part, like the first month of our internship, we mostly spent finding.
I mean, the good news is, was it getting easier over time because you needed it? Well, actually, at this point, I'm only looking for housing for like the next 72 hours. My internship's not
No, much worse, because the landlords didn't want to sign a lease for a month or two or three.
Okay.
They wanted to lock you into a year lease, and the only way I got it was eventually my parents like co-signed, and I had like power of attorney. Like, it was ludicrous what we went through, but it was literally, there was a day when we're like, we're going to need to sleep in the office if we don't like deliver the jade monkey to this landlord. So that was when I sort of like understood how different Silicon Valley was, especially in that moment. But maybe less perilously, we showed up, and I remember you came to office and said, you can go to this fatbrain.com website and order whatever book you want. And we were like, well, you mean, that's relevant to the internship? And you said, no.
I mean, relevant if you want.
Books.
I'm just saying, like, you can order whatever you want.
That's right. And I think we took that maybe too seriously. Like, I think I don't remember what I got paid during the internship, but it almost sort of like doubled its worth on the number of books.
Did you use that as a chip when you were negotiating a lease? You're like, look, I can get you whatever book you want. Does that help sweeten the pot for this to get a roof over my head?
Yeah. So that, I mean, from my 20-year-old eyes, it was all very strange. But I mean, you must have. I mean, I can't even imagine kind of what you saw leading up to that?
Well, it was definitely nuts. I mean, and you had like people certainly. I mean, things were very, very overheated. It felt, and traffic was terrible. Hard to get housing and so on. For me, and I think that like Pets.com, I want to say was like April or something like that of 2000. So that was actually that had actually busted out. But just like I think kind of the period we're in now, people looked at some of those early flameouts. I think Boo.com was early, Pets.com was early, and people were like, okay, that's obviously ridiculous. Like everybody knew,
Of course, right.
everybody knew that was going to flame out, which is true. That like when things really turn and expectations really turn, it's the stuff that immediately capsizes is the stuff that was actually in trouble, had been in trouble for a while. And even in a frothy environment was going to really struggle. So, and everybody I feel rationalized would be like, no, that's not us. Like we're picks and shovels. We're not,
Right. We're real. Now, one of the things that was very different about that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that there was this mad dash to IPO. So it wasn't just like the folks at those companies who were exposed to it. It was really everyone, like the broader public was participating in a way that they don't get to in the more recent froth.
Absolutely.
Okay,
and it wasn't just in the .com companies, Adam. I mean, these are tech companies, but like I could have gone. I had job offers from Cisco and Sun in late 1995 after having 2 years in NRL. And hey, look, we built IPv6 and IPsec for BSD. A lot of more than a few of the people I would have worked with at Cisco left 6 months after I moved out. Brian, you and I started within months, maybe weeks of each other. And they all went to a little startup founded partially by some Xerox PARC and spent a little time at Sun people named Juniper Networks. I suspect you've heard of them. They went public, before 2000, if I remember correctly. And that was like mad dash too. Oh my God, we're building routers. Backbone people are buying it. This is back when you could ask who built your BGP, and the number of people on that list was countable in one or two hands.
Well,
and one of them worked for Juniper.
Yeah, and I think that there was a mad dash to IPO. I think also, I mean, Adam, in terms of like the broader public, I mean, day trading was a thing, right? And I feel that there was this idea of these day traders that were, people in their underwear trading these IPO tech stocks. I think that actually there isn't an exact analog to today with Web3 and cryptocurrency, where you had broadened it to people who are these bubbles get kind of hyper frothy when expectations become so distorted that people don't think that they can bust. And that to me is like a common theme between the .com boom and bust, the housing boom and bust, and the boom and bust, the Web3, I think, for lack of a better word, boom and the bust that we're about to go through, is that people's expectations had fundamentally shifted. Things can't possibly bust. And then that distorted investment and activity. And that led to the absolute nuttiness. And that's part of the reason why I think things turn so quickly, is because you have a decent number of people who are like, this can't be right. And I definitely remember at the time being like, this is nuts. And I think that I remember reading like Economist covers in like 1999 warning about that things were too frothy. And I remember thinking like, I used to agree with the Economist, but now I think they might be wrong. I think this is going to go on forever. And for me, like the moment of that the actual bubble burst was not that kind of in the NASDAQ begins to correct in early 2000. There was this period where, and I can't remember I would like to remember exactly when it was. And I think it may have even been the summer of 2000, but certainly by the fall of 2000, traffic got better. And that was super eerie because it was kind of like it was almost like, you're in the commute, like past the accident or whatever, and it's like super light. But then that happened the next day, and then the next day, and everyone was like, was traffic late for you? Like, what's going on?
Well, all the .coms were shedding personnel because they were starting to like the bust was
The bus was starting. Yeah.
Like I remember this, and it was this thing where so like you mentioned the history. I think it's important to go back to the globe.com. You're like, when do you date the beginning of the boom? To me, that was the beginning of the boom.
It's the globe.
Because they IPO'd and went to like, yes, because they IPO'd and their valuation went to like $2 billion in the first day. And it was like something that two guys were running out of their dorm room in Cornell.
What is the globe.com?
It was ridiculous.
I don't even know what the globe.com was or is.
It was some like stupid portal thing. And, but it was like people got like really into it. And it was one of these things where, a bunch of people see that like the globe.com's valuation went to $2 billion and they're like, oh my God, like there's money here. I have to get in.
Yeah, interesting. So they are just like from the Wikipedia article here on the globe.com. So yeah, founded in 95 and IPO'd in 98. So yeah, damn, I can see what so you're saying. So that's when like the boom goes kind of non-linear after the globe.com or about that time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, because think about it, right? It's people look at this and they're like, this is dumb. I remember looking at the World Wide Web in 1992 or maybe 3 and being like, this is stupid. Like, there's no utility in here. Nobody, like, this isn't going to go anywhere. This is dumb. This technology sucks. Right? Boy, was I wrong. But, but like the globe legitimately was dumb. I mean, it was a stupid idea. And yet all of a sudden these guys had like $2 billion and it's, you imagine all these like Wall Street sort of like middle finance type people that are like, I'm going to go start a company and make $1 billion and, doing technology stuff. And pretty soon that becomes unsustainable circa early 2000, right? And I remember the company I worked for at the time laid off their entire engineering department. I had just left this place. Like a month later, they laid off all the programmers. And they said, well, now that we've completed our technology investment, we no longer need.
Oh, there you go. That makes sense.
Makes sense.
Wow.
I feel like at least they had the globe.com, though. Now it's just pictures of monkeys. Like what? I mean, it's even less this time.
I have those monkeys are smoking some primo shit. Okay,
exactly. I think they're about the same. I have to say about the same. I'm not sure that.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the globe.com had more utility than the monkey pictures. I mean, call me crazy.
It is now defunct. I don't know. It's hard to say. About the same. I mean, I think all of these things distort investment, right? You end up with things being invested in that should not be invested in. So Dan, when was your entire engineering department laid off? When was that?
So I had jumped ship in like June of 2000, and it was like a month or two later. And it was, like this is New York City, right? This is not Silicon Valley. It's a much smaller tech community. And, like I had friends at this place. And when, I get this like phone call from a guy one day and he's like, dude, you're never going to believe what just happened. And I'm like, tell me. He's like, they just took all the programmers in some conference room and fired them all.
Wow.
It was like, but it also became one of these things where it was almost gleeful in some sense. Like people knew they were going to get people who were working in technology understood that these ideas were dumb. They weren't going to go anywhere.
Yes.
You had business people who had no idea what the internet was about or how it worked or anything. And then, they were trying to like grab onto that really large pie, which turned out to not be all that big. And they were just like, oh, hey, gee, we're not making money anymore, and we're bleeding cash because we have these amazing office spaces in Midtown Manhattan.
Right.
Or whatever. What do we do? It's like you fire all the programmers. Who needs those idiots?
Problem solved. Wait, but I feel like there's this period, and again, I would love to know exactly because I remember it, and I feel it's like through the kind of summer and fall of 2000. Where the things that were, I mean, you had companies that were, laying off all the programmers thinking that they were kind of positioning themselves for success. But we were calling it the correction. Like, Adam, do you remember us calling it the correction?
Yeah, absolutely. But they've called, I mean, correction, if I'm correct if I'm wrong, but is a technical term meaning like a 10% drop in the stock.
Yeah. I mean, there's the technical definition of a correction, but people called it the correction. Like it is, there was this idea of like, yes, there was this froth. We're going to correct that. And I think like one of the big lessons for me from the .com bust is the elevator's in free fall. So it doesn't stop at the ground floor. You think it will, but it won't. Like
or at least what you thought was the ground floor is
Well, yeah,
quite high.
exactly. And so like the idea of like we're just gonna kind of like there is no such thing as a controlled burn in Silicon Valley. Like we only do conflagration around here. We only let fuel load get way too high, and the longer you let the fuel load build, the hotter and longer it's going to burn. And I feel so that you had, and for me, I remember so you go kind of through the summer of 2000, it's kind of the correction, and traffic is better eerily. But, you know, Adam, we're all participating in this group delusion that we're picks and shovels. For me, the absolute tip top was September of 2000. I was at a dinner with a bunch of folks from Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley spent, I think, like $850 million in IT infrastructure that year, which is a lot, and had bought a ton of Sun gear. And I remember there were 19 of us, and we are just like eating like 19th century robber barons. I mean,
picks and shovels.
We are eating like Oaks Ames, the so-called king of spades. Right. We really are. I mean, and it is like if you ever look at like a 19th century menu from the Gilded Age, and it's these menus just like how many courses? They're like 15 courses here. But so we are, and in particular, at the end, and we're at Aqua, San Francisco restaurant. Did you ever eat at Aqua?
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, Aqua. Did you say it's fantastic? Do you actually mean it was fantastic?
Yes, I really do.
Do you feel you can defend that? I absolutely think it's overrated. I felt that was like a New York restaurant that was like cosplaying in San Francisco. And in particular, they used to, I just remember they were, I mean, the waiters, God, the waiters like make hay when the sun is shining, were pounding us through wine. So like every wine glass is being filled all the way to like the tip top, like it's a cup of coffee. And I'm not like a lightweight to begin with. So like I'm drunk, and we are at the end of the meal, one of the Morgan Stanley folks orders Chateau d'Yquem, which is a Sauterne, like 1955 Chateau d'Yquem, which, and I'm not a wine drinker. I don't know. All I know is like, this is like $1,000 a bottle. And we just start burning through it.
Best enjoyed by drug people.
Right, exactly. So I've had Chateau d'Yquem, but I don't really remember it. I mean, I wasn't like blacked out, but I definitely remember it. And the bill for the 19 of us was over $20,000. And I remember getting home, and it's like 2 a.m. now. I'm in my apartment in San Francisco. I'm just thinking like, I'm like drunk. I'm literally drunk on literal Chateau d'Yquem. And I just remember so vividly thinking, this can't go on. This has to stop. And I swear that is the moment, because I control time and space with my mind. That is the moment that everything stopped. And
and this is like
September of 2000.
2000.
And November of that year, November of 2000, the telcos all imploded. And like literally telcos had been ordering tons and tons of infrastructure, and they all simultaneously stopped. And there were like no orders in November. And then everything just went into absolute free fall, and it was layoffs and you're still kind of like trying to convince yourself that like maybe it's not that bad. But then Adam, so you had offers because you're back at school now.
Yeah. So this is the weird stuff. So you're off at this boozy dinner. I'm back at school, and me and my friends are all interviewing for jobs like in November, December, January, November, December 2000, January 2001. And we kind of don't catch a whiff of this, right? Like we know that Silicon Valley is imploding, but nobody's pausing, right? Like nobody's saying, like actually don't come fly out. Like we don't have any positions for you.
Because we're embarrassed.
No, everything's saying go, go. And maybe they're also thinking, hey, we can get these cheaper employees in or something like that. But even companies like Trilogy, I don't know if you remember them.
Trilogy,
but like,
yes.
Yeah. Like very eager to get took everyone to the nicest restaurant in Providence, Rhode Island, and eager to get everyone out to Austin to interview. So
Trilogy go. Trilogy is infamous though. Did you go out to Austin with Trilogy?
You know what? I didn't. I actually.
That's a lost opportunity.
I know. I know. It's a huge lost opportunity. At that point, I had the offers that I was serious about. A buddy of mine who had gone to Trilogy had like it turns out like he had needed to get like his insurance certification or something like that, and it took some like peeling back of layers, but it turned out he was just miserable. So I decided not to go to Austin, and the recruiter was like, we paid for the trip. I hear that you don't want to work here, but you should just come anyway. And it took a lot of convincing that I had like not left anything at Trilogy. Like, we just didn't need to see each other anymore. It was over. But no, I didn't go to Austin.
Because Trilogy famously was paying a lot. They were overpaying, honestly. And they apparently, this is not apocryphal, but as part of the like Trilogy the orientation, you would go to Vegas and they would force you to bet $1,000 of your own money on roulette.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've read and what I heard from this guy who again worked there.
Is this a crime organization?
They're out of business. And what was the Trilogy? What was the like? They're not Trilogy Systems, Trilogy Software. What were they? They were a consulting goober, right?
Oh, say no more. During the dot-com boom, look, if you're going to talk about the boom and the bust, you have to talk about these scummy consultants.
Yes, which I think Trilogy is the name plus ultra. But yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I mean, so we worked with a company called Scient at one of the startups I was at, the one I joined in 1999. And, speaking of Sun, like part of the reason I hesitate saying this because I don't want to insult Sun, and that's not my intent here, but it was kind of obvious by 1999 that if you wanted to scale out a big website, you bought like 1,000 cheapos Intel boxes and threw Linux on them.
Ooh, by 99. Okay. Yeah, that's early.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For sure. Absolutely. And companies like Scient would come into a startup and be like, no, you need to go buy like a shit ton of Sun gear. Go buy an E4500, like, the Boo.com E10K. I understand why they bought that. They were probably like told by some consultant, you buy this, you put one CPU board in it, but now you have space to grow.
Listen, I need my Chateau d'Yquem, Dan. I need my Chateau d'Yquem. The Chateau d'Yquem is not going to drink itself.
I need my trip to London on the one engineer a week rotation, which is what I was doing in September of 2000. We had fire sale hired a bunch of ex-SCO engineers in Watford, UK.
Yes, I remember that. And we were so desperate for people that we were just hiring folks en masse, sight unseen.
There were some good ones in there. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed talking to those Watford guys, and but it was like they were sending one Solaris network technology engineer a week out there, and I got to go in September sometime.
About this. So Adam, you are just Trilogy. So you managed to not take your trip to Austin, which would have given you a lifetime full of stories. So obviously, mistake.
Missed opportunity.
Now, how do you compare that to not having the Juicero backpack in terms of like your life's mistakes? How do you rate this?
I think that probably that recruiting trip would have been indistinguishable from others, which is like some whiteboard interviews
I agree.
And like some boozy dinners. But like the Juicero backpack would have been something I give to my kids and they give to their kids.
Heirloom.
So,
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. No, that's the way I see it too. But I just wanted to get your.
But on the other hand, nothing for like the descendants to fight over. Like who's going to get the backpack?
It's true. The Juicero backpack locked up in probate court among your warring children. All right. So you but you don't go to Trilogy. And then what's happening to folks back at school with offers?
Oh, so then, offers are going out, but we're also hearing people walking back offers, and like offers getting rescinded, offers getting delayed. In particular, as in the financials, like at that time, maybe it's still true. I think it was just at that time the sort of like if you didn't know what you wanted to do, you didn't go to law school, you went into financial services as like an investment banker.
Yes, don't say iBanker.
Yeah, right. Like that.
My sister gets upset.
I mean, yeah, that's like sort of what you did, and like I guess there were briefly lots of jobs for those folks, and then lots of folks who got those jobs got told actually like you can come 6 months later or not at all.
Yes, and my sister started working at Morgan Stanley in 2000, and so I can definitely confirm that she felt like she was the last in the door for sure. Things definitely changed in 2001, and I just remember your offer at Sun. We had to fight for that offer. That was not an easy. By that point in time, there had been a hiring freeze, and these things are always way too blanket. And I think Sun was kind of panicking. So I just remember us having to escalate quite a bit to get to be able to make you an offer. If I recall correctly, it was the next year that was it. So when we were hiring, not 2001, but in 2002, that's when it required like an act of Congress to hire someone. That was really, really difficult.
Well, when I did, so I showed up and into a bunch of layoffs.
Yeah.
So, this now like September, October 2001.
2001, yeah.
I remember going to like some party where I met with someone who had graduated a year before me. I said that I started at Sun, and she said that she and her whole group had just been laid off. And she was pretty pissed off at me that I had just been hired into this company that had
just laid her off.
Yeah, I'm brutal.
And 9/11 happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was, on the one hand, like unrelated. On the other hand, I feel served as an accelerant. I don't think that it would have.
Oh yeah, it absolutely killed off. Like the correction had started the year prior, but and again, speaking from New York City, like when 9/11 happened, it just everything came to a halt.
Yeah.
Right. And it just absolutely killed a large chunk of what, so we didn't have Silicon Valley, we had Silicon Alley, which people thought was clever and I thought was dumb. But all of the little sort of .com-y type companies that were holding on through the correction were just like, okay, that's it. Like we're done.
Yeah.
And that led to a multi-year, basically drying up of the desert and the New York tech.
Yeah, and I feel that also, like, aside from kind of the infinite sadness of 9/11, I also feel that it kind of fundamentally changed expectations. Like, if you had expectations of this thing being over quickly, all of a sudden your forward expectations were just like a mess. And I think that whatever possibly at that point you get like total capitulation, whether it's due to 9/11 or accelerated by it. I feel like once you hit in the end of 2001 going into 2002, you are at total capitulation or near it.
That's right. You just people recognizing that this isn't a brief dip and it's all going to come back.
Right.
But it's just going to be more of the same.
It's going to be more of the same. And Theo, I saw you becoming a speaker here. I'm trying to remember, because you obviously also had a front row seat for this stuff. What do you remember of things kind of busting out? I'm sure if Theo is there or not. I'll let Theo unmute when he can. But because I remember, Theo also was. We're all kind of the same vintage and watching things effectively bust out. I'm trying to remember, because Adam, I feel the one thing I definitely felt, and this is a little bit morbid, but I felt much more clarity in the bust than the boom. Like about what we were doing.
You mean in terms of like the utility of like concretely the work we were doing?
Well, I just remember like there were many fewer stupid arguments. It just felt like things felt like they were so desperate.
Well, I only came. I really only sort of woke up after the bust, so I feel like we had plenty of stupid arguments. So I can't even imagine how many stupid arguments.
You think those are stupid arguments? You've seen stupid arguments.
I feel like the governance model of Sun was mostly fueled by stupid arguments.
Oh, and I'm just saying that is like a tenth of the stupid arguments that I feel that not a tenth, but I feel that one of the side effects of really focusing people on just survival, which is on the one hand stressful, on the other hand, there's a bunch of shit that just goes away. Sun had a director of volleyball. I don't know if you
No.
I just remember like there's these volleyball games being organized, and this on the one hand, like, all right, I like I like volleyball, I'm just like I'm at
But
work
you're
right now.
just saying it shouldn't be covered by the D&O
Well,
insurance. Your directors and officers.
Well,
insurance.
there was a what is now Meta. There was like a health club.
Yeah, like Building 19. Or
Yeah,
whatever,
did you ever go over there?
Yeah, I did once.
I feel like because you and Pete were availing yourselves of all fringe benefits. I feel if anyone would have gone over there, did you ever play volleyball?
Not at only in Sun in Prague. Not
Okay. I just remember like so much like pressure to join. This guy's like clearly upset that people are not playing lunchtime volleyball, and there's like this like constant mail going out to the entire company. I just remember like looking this guy up on the org tool and be like, what is up with this like volleyball guy? And it's like he's a director. He's like director of volleyball.
No, we were probably looking at the gym to see if we could sleep there.
It's like that's why you're just. Is there a part of the volleyball court that's sheltered a little bit? We just need to. Yeah.
Like, what's the comfiest part? Would you say?
Exactly.
I was looking back at like the offer materials from Sun, and one of the most like amazing things in hindsight, like it was ludicrous in the moment, but the way that Sun and all these companies talked about their stock like it could only grow, and if it was only growing 10% a year, then your stock sucked. And like this included conversations with recruiters saying that stock options that were priced higher were worth more, because if you think about it, and it grows 15% every year, then what you really want is the stock options that have a very high strike price.
Of course.
And I did not take any economics in college, but that just didn't really seem that right to me.
I'm not sure about the math. Hey, well, you know what? Picks and shovels,
like
man.
This is a pro, right? Picks and shovels. Right? King of Spades knows what he's talking about.
Exactly. So do you remember there was a billboards on the 101 were like the hot property?
Yeah, absolutely.
And but everyone begins to capsize and disappear. And you've got companies that are dying, but they've rented their billboard on the 101. And do you remember the Garden.com billboard?
No.
So the Garden.com was definitely a .com flame out, and they're selling like gardening supplies online or whatever. And Garden.com which is probably a bad use of society's scarce resources, they took a billboard on the 101, already arguably a bad idea, and they had it covered with greenery, like actual greenery. Which is like, I mean, I don't know. I guess kind of nice. It was on the 101, like by Redwood Shores, where you got like all those billboards in a row. If you remember where that is.
Yeah, like where people post their billboards to tweak Oracle.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
in that neighborhood, not exactly where that is, but yeah, in that neighborhood. And so Garden.com capsizes, and so they are no longer able to like water the plants on their billboard.
Oh God!
And it was this amazing metaphor, and over like the months, these plants just like wither and die, and they look like graphic. And I just remember but the lights are still on in this thing. So you pass this thing, the lights are on, and it's like all these like dead branches around this garden. It's like, wow, this is very telling. And finally, someone is like, turn off the lights on that thing. And so it was just like dark billboard because the company didn't exist.
What one of the sad moments going into the Oxide office, like at the worst of the pandemic, was going in and like the plants we had bought just like unwatered, dead. And I feel like a microcosm of that same symbol.
Right? Yeah. No, dead plants. The plants are dying. This definitely you've lost a bird song here, and definitely was. So, and I remember there were buildings. There were a lot of people had buildings that they were going to build, and that all stopped. And one of the things that was also kind of educational as this stuff all unspooled is you have everyone kind of like is just going to batten the hatches and thinks they can survive. But when they batten the hatches, they pull in a bunch of spending that has all these knock-on effects. So, the event planners all capsized, and all of the, real estate, commercial real estate went from absolutely unavailable to just a total surfeit of commercial real estate.
So I mean, my perspective on this was definitely from the other side of a pane of glass, because I ran a consultancy, and we had lots of clients that survived, because all the clients that didn't fired us. So, but I entered the industry in like '96, and definitely had a whole bunch of college roommates that went to work for Trilogy. So to
Nice.
quickly recap, from my secondhand experience of that is that yes, they did require you to gamble. It was roulette. Everyone had to gamble $1,000,
Right.
but it wasn't your money,
That's crazy.
and it was all on different squares, so there was a guaranteed winner.
Okay. So it wasn't your money. I don't know why
It
this makes
wasn't.
better.
They supplied you $1,000 and made you bet, but only one person walked away with the pot.
And what's the theory behind that? What is the Harvard Business Review article describing this managerial technique?
I think that they wanted to make sure that everyone there was comfortable taking absolutely stupid risks.
All right.
I think the other side of that too is that it makes, one of those, whatever it is, 32, is a winner, and like everyone gets to tell the story about Dave who won the $32,000
Exactly.
and took everyone out to drinks, right? Like I think it's it's both the risk everything and the survivor bias of the winner.
Right.
And I will say that not being in a product company, it felt like the bust was prolonged for us. I mean, it definitely happened in 2000, but it really didn't finish until about 2002, because all of those companies that pivoted and believed they could survive, they could hang on to sometimes as much as 2 years.
Right.
While they were doing it. And I remember when I realized that everything was really, really done was probably in 2002, when I was sitting in a due diligence meeting, and the CEO of the company that I was doing due diligence support for with, I want to say it was Goldman Sachs, but it might have been Morgan Stanley, took me aside and said that they would issue me a personal loan to convert my options. And I was like, that is the worst effing idea I have ever heard in my life. We have jumped the, jumped the shark.
But that was in 2002, though.
And continues
That was
to be the worst
2002.
idea, right?
That was 2002.
I don't know. It
yeah.
sounds revolutionary to me. We should get more companies to do that right now.
Ryan Breslow should write a blog post about this.
Stop, the Ryan King. Yeah, I mean, it is amazing how now another generation needs to learn what an unbelievably bad idea that is. But Theo, I'm amazed that was in 2002, when I feel like we were kind of post
March of 2002.
Because I feel like we kind of got post capitulation. Because I also think like the bust went on for way longer, and went on for I felt like a very long. I mean, just got to the point where it's like, this is the new normal. The new normal is like, tech is not people are not coming here seeking riches. They are no longer day trading. They are not thinking about, they're not day trading on their IPO. And the new normal is that tech is just a part of the economy. It wasn't.
Yeah, and another data point from then a student and then a recently graduated student was, when I left, the intro to computer science classes were the biggest they'd ever been, needing to spill over into multiple classrooms. By 2002, they had contracted by like half, and it continued to decline. So
that's a really important point. I mean, bear in mind that when the boom was happening, I had a friend who was working at one of these startups who said any idiot who can spell IT thinks that they can get a job as a programmer. And so you had this glut of people who, bluntly just weren't very talented. They weren't good programmers. They didn't necessarily know what they were doing. And, but there was just such a demand for warm bodies filling seats that almost anybody could get a job. And
sounds like today.
Played well. Well, yeah, exactly.
Well,
this is, the Web3 thing.
Well, and so it'd be interesting to track that metric now, Adam, because certainly we're back. I mean, computer science is by far the biggest course on every campus.
It's huge right now. Something I have these data in front of somewhere on my computer, but something like a quarter of Brown graduates have taken a computer science class or in some sort of partial major. I got to go pull those data up, but the number is staggering.
And so, do you feel that this bust changes that? This coming bust?
Yeah, man, that's going to be really interesting. I think in particular because I think some of the hype was sort of so narrowly focused, and one of the things that's very different now is I feel like I have a much better read on venture, and I really did not at all. I have no idea what it looked like. I mean, do you have any sense of that? Like, were you plugged into venture in like through the bust?
The only in an ancillary fashion. So, I mean, obviously, I was not an entrepreneur. Not, we were, but we played ultimate with venture capitalists. That's
well, there you go.
My connection to venture capitalists was like the fact that and certainly, if you look at the firms that started in like 2005, 2006, there were a lot of bootstrap companies. I mean, VC got cratered. And people picked their winners, and there was not a lot of new investment. I mean, just by the numbers. I feel like have you read The Hard Thing About Hard Things, Adam?
Yeah, I have, but it's been a couple of years.
Horowitz's story there is pretty amazing. He's on the road show, just like everything coming unglued. Wow, he's trying to IPO, and he needs an IPO to make payroll. And I feel like that's, that kind of generation that's another, 5 to 10 years older than I am anyway. So I did not endure that, but I think that, it was bad it was really, really bad. And you had all of these companies that were you had term sheets getting pulled, you had capital calls not being made. All these kind of like things that supposedly can't happen again. But I do fear that that's where I'd love to, if other folks were either raising then or had raised, it'd be great to get your experience. It was brutal though, I think is the short answer. Matt, you got your hand up.
Yes. So I just wanted to quickly offer my perspective on the boom and bust from outside the Valley. Because I started college in fall of 1999 when the boom was well underway, and the thing that I most distinctly remember that affected me and various things that I was involved with were the free free hosting services that were like for hosting a website or streaming audio that were available online during the boom, and then by 2001 and definitely into 2002, they were trying to push everyone to pay or suffer ads.
Yeah, Matt, what was the thing that like they gave you a computer to watch ads? Do you remember this?
alladvantage.com. Well, the one I remember was alladvantage.com, which was some kind of like browser add-on or something that would pay you to watch ads. But a free computer.
I feel like
I don't remember the free computer.
Free.com. I feel like there was something that was.
There was, of course, Net Zero.
Yes, Net Zero. Ironically named. Well, and actually, I remember. The Excite at Home also cratered, and I remember. Do you remember their building, Adam?
Where was that?
They had a building. They had
people at home before the merger.
Oh yeah, right. So it was at home, and then Excite. So that became Excite at Home, and that went.
Snorting VC put them together. That's what I want to know.
Tom Jermalock, former CFO. Exactly.
That makes sense.
Someone had there's a great Business Week article on the Gee Whiz company at SGI, looking at the downfall of SGI, and Tom Jermalock was that's the answer to your question. But I just remember it going from a field like nothing to a building to a totally full parking lot to a totally empty parking lot to a building with like broken windows that no one was occupying, and all that felt like it happened within 24 months, from like field to like derelict building happened just remarkably quickly over probably from 2000 to 2002.
Another big thing I remember on the consumer side of this was all of the free phone call providers. Because remember, 1999, 2000, making long distance calls on a landline actually cost something. And
right.
And there were all these companies like dialpad.com and Delta 3 and I forget the others, but and by late 2001, they were tight. They were tightening things up and imposing ads or whatever.
God, paying for long distance is such a timepiece. I feel I'm just like
even the term long distance.
The term long distance.
AT&T is alive and well and fleecing people for hundreds of dollars for calls to this day for what they describe as long distance. They're the phone company. They don't have to care.
What, you mean that's still a thing?
Oh yes, I just received the bill. Like I made a call to some. It's all phone companies are from another time.
But I remember that by late 2001 was when we really started to feel it as consumers, and I particularly remember that there was this whole shoutcast internet radio audio streaming scene that I was into back then. And there was a website called shoutclub.com that had a directory of these online stations, and I forget what else. And in December 2001, the owner of the website posted an article called "Waking Up from the Dream of Free Internet."
Oh, this is the rip good times for free internet
for at least for this little piece of the bubble.
Okay, and so Matt, did you go to fuckedcompany at all? Fuckedcompany.com at all? I feel like that. Okay, that I feel like was a common thing though, right?
Yeah, that was everyone's homepage. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. Oh, that was so fun.
Because there is this kind of like Schadenfreude phase of the bust. Maybe it didn't actually end, that Schadenfreude phase. Where
what's that? My Wonderful Journey blog thing,
right? Right. But on the one hand, there's something that feels like the even though it's not truly wicked, but that the way that there does feel like there's justice is being served by the economy. The problem is there's lots of like collateral damage. But I definitely remember going to fuckcompany.com quite a bit. And
I'll do you one better than that. So at one of the startups I worked at on 23rd Street, across the street was this nice Irish bar where we'd all kind of hang out after hours. And in the building where our offices were, on some other floor, there was some other company that was pretty well known. I can't remember what they were now. It was some sort of online gaming type thing or something. And they basically went belly up one day. And so they all just like left and decamped to the bar. And then we showed up, and it just became this enormous, just like, nowadays it would be all shit posting on Twitter, but we were just like talking shit about the places where we worked. And it was wonderfully cathartic and fun. But, we all like basically had this drunken thing, and everybody was like, and these guys are like, all right, we won't see you tomorrow, in the elevator or whatever.
Wow. Yeah. And so, Dan, did you know people who left tech? I mean, because I feel like,
yeah, for sure. I mean, there were people who were just like, I'm done. There was one guy who went and like lived on an island off the coast of Brazil, studying capoeira for like 2 years or something like that. I mean, it's just a lot of people who had options who were just like, I don't want to deal with this. I left tech, actually, now that I think about it. I basically quit the computer industry for 5 years. I burned out after 2001, and I was just like, screw this. I'm going to go do other things with my life.
And then how did the bust kind of affect because I feel like the bust definitely affected my own thinking. Certainly I felt like I had some immunity around the housing bubble. When the housing bubble started building, I'm like, wait a minute, we literally just walked out of this movie. Like, what are we doing as a society?
I got to properly credit this because it was 2003 or 2004 when you and I were in Shanghai, Brian.
Right.
And you were explaining the looming, to a 23-year-old or whatever it was, the looming housing disaster, and it all made perfect sense, except for the timing. But you had called it perfectly.
Right, and I remember thinking that the housing market had topped in 2003. It's like, whoops, definitely wrong. And I just remember like 85% of all mortgages to originate in San Francisco were option arms, and I'm like, okay, that's a top. And I'm like, that's 2003, and it's got a lot longer to run. And part of what makes these things they do run up way longer than you think they should. And I mean, I think it has. I mean, the bust was so deep though and so long that it forever changed the way that. Certainly, I mean, when we raised at Oxide, I mean, Steve Searden can offer his perspective, but I mean, we felt that there would be a bust in VC, and when we raised in 2019, we felt that it couldn't go on. And
we thought it was 2 years overdue. Like 2018 was when it was supposed to all burn down.
Right. And so we felt we were on borrowed time. And Steve, I remember us talking very explicitly about we deliberately wanted to raise enough that when there was a funding, when VC firms needed to pick their winners, we would not be a small bet. We were forcing a larger bet.
Yeah, and it went on for 3 more years.
It went on for 3 more years, and it got way nuttier.
Do you think that the pandemic gave a reprieve to all of these things, basically pushed off the emergence of a bust?
Yes. Because I think that the pandemic got so scary financially. So, I mean, I think that we came very close to things getting truly cataclysmic in March, April 2020.
I would say there's another factor in that, and that the pandemic, especially in tech, caused a pretty big shift in income inequality, and there are a lot of techpreneurs that have nowhere to put their money, so they're trying to jam it into VCs.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that you get this that Theo, when you have a bubble that when it goes on long enough, people are beginning to plow all their winnings back into the bubble, which makes the bubble go even more nonlinear.
It did, and the pandemic disproportionately inflated net worth of tech people versus other people.
Well, and with the low interest rates, folks looking for growth, like Fidelity's and T. Rowe Price, all these folks who weren't traditionally involved in venture started dipping down. And then you get these both, seeds and pre-seeds in, present company excluded, of course, that were much bigger than previously. And, certainly not in the case of Oxide, but a lot of these companies we've seen, things that didn't really make sense, but all caught up in this froth.
Yeah. And I think people also then raising too much money. Right, or actually raising on too high valuation.
Yeah, and I think you're right that like the perilousness of March 2020 and the pandemic and the ensuing financial uncertainty has probably propped up interest rates and therefore propped up all of venture. And now that interest rates are up, everyone's leaving.
Yeah, I mean we basically hosed down the entire economy in cash to just keep things basically afloat. The problem is that, Theo, I agree with you that it was such a brute force mechanism that it actually exacerbated income inequality. And I mean, I feel that putting money in people's pockets that don't need it, you're going to end up with things like cryptocurrency, right? Where I think the stimulus checks, it'd be interesting to know. I think it's kind of unknowable, but what fraction of the stimulus checks went to cryptocurrency? Some fraction.
This is a data point along these lines. A buddy of mine works for Twitch and has access to a bunch of their data, and the stimulus checks were very noticeable in their data. That folks were watching more streaming video, and when those $2,000 came out, or whatever it was, or $600 came out. Very visible in their data. So obviously not crypto, but going to places where maybe the money hadn't gone previously, traditionally.
Do you think that there's a qualitative difference in setting aside perhaps the crypto circus, but all the other companies that have come up in the last 5, 6, 7 years? Is there a qualitative difference in their ability to at least have revenue? It feels like in the original .com thing, no one knew how to make money from the globe.com or almost anything else that was happening.
Are you accusing boo.com of not having a good revenue model?
Well, there wasn't even a way to get payments. Like, Whereas now, like Spotify and every other service at least can have a subscription, and it's understood that like all these streaming services can rake in $9 a month or something per subscriber. And we know at least now, like there's kind of a language for people actually paying for things. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that to a point. I mean, but can Uber be profitable?
Well, like, no, but that's because they're a large like crime organization trying to obliterate the taxi system. I mean,
but you wonder if Uber and Lyft are viable businesses at what they need to charge in order to be profitable.
And those are even extreme examples. I mean, I think that there's lots of much smaller companies where while you have investors and entrepreneurs talking about the death of the magical thinking that led us to the dot-com bust, I think doing a lot of the same things. And I think there is still this thought that there's this alchemical formula for turning eyeballs and clicks into revenue.
It is.
And there isn't, or people don't know what it is. And so,
I mean, Google stumbled on the whole AdWords fountain of money back in 1990, whatever. And that has led to this idea that it's like, oh my God, you just do ads and all of a sudden you rake in, billions of dollars a quarter. And it's like,
the information monopoly.
Well, yeah, basically you have to be one of the, like 6 sites on the internet for which that is true. But I think Josh asked an interesting question. Like, is there a qualitative difference between now and the dot-com era? And I'm going to say yes. I mean, I was sort of safely tucked away in a little corner in Google for most of this boom, but I've never seen anything that approached the levels of just like straight up, frankly, fraud that you saw during the dot-com boom. And it's not even close.
No, I totally agree with that, but I do think that it's a matter of degree, and I think there are a lot of Josh had asked about or commented on these companies that have no path to profitability, and any potential path has now been foreclosed. I think we're going to see a lot of that, but agreed, Dan, nowhere near the level that we saw in 2001.
So okay, I'm not so sure though, because I think that you also can have companies that are viable going concerns, but for whom the expectations are so far ahead of what they can possibly do. I mean, Snowflake's market cap was bigger than their TAM, right? I mean, it's like that's not sustainable. And where you end up going is expectations will, I think, overshoot on the other side. And it gets really grinding. I mean, Sun was trading below its cash. The market cap was less than our cash, which is really like, talk about like a
vote of no confidence.
No confidence. Like we actually think you're actively burning it. Like because I just remember and ultimately, and when things busted out again in 2008, 2009, leading the acquisition, it's like, I mean, Sun was acquired effectively for a song. And I feel that you're going to see there are definitely some viable companies in here for sure. And I think, is it more viable than the dot-com bust? I don't know. I think we're going to have to look at in hindsight, because I just don't know how much of Uber and Lyft, how much of Airbnb relies on this kind of infinitely long boom with discretionary income. I don't know. I mean,
Brian, I don't know if it was you who told me this, but someone said the harbinger of the boom, harbinger of these bubbles, is when you start seeing food delivery services. And I know that sounds ridiculous now because we've all become accustomed to it. But whenever that started proliferating, probably you'd say 4 years ago, people were saying, that's what was happening in 2001. That's what was happening in 2007. Yeah.
Cosmo.com, baby.
Yeah. And yet now, I mean, like, of course, but food should be delivered to my house. Like, why is that anomalous?
But now you have different grocery delivery services competing for 30 minutes versus 15 minutes versus 10 minutes. And yeah, you're definitely going to see some consolidation there. Just on one of the earlier points, it brought me back because, Adam, you were talking about, I think it was Tivoli or some of the Austin tech companies. I was in Austin.
Trilogy, not Tivoli. Tivoli's a good one.
So Tivoli and Trilogy both were hoovering up employees in Austin. I got there in October 99, and that's when I started at Dell. And just one quick hilarious story in retrospect. Dell was infamous for having this group of Dellionaires that would get written about, and you would read about this, and for good reason, because the stock in the 90s had gone up by something like 90,000%. It had the largest increase of any stock from whatever, like end of 89 to end of 99. And so I showed up, of course, at the absolute peak, and our like entrance class that came in, they brought our class to this big auditorium, and they had this pardon me.
No, it's just you, Brian.
Okay.
Steve, you sound good.
Okay.
Oh no!
And they brought us in this big auditorium, and they put a video up on the board. So like bunch of food and drinks and pomp and circumstance, and they put up on the screen this rendition of from Sister Sledge, "We Are Family." Instead, it was "We Are Dellionaires," and you would see Dell employees dancing on desks as they dropped fake options from the ceiling. And so it was the absolute pinnacle of excess. And at the time, you didn't realize it. You were just like, "Oh, this is great." And then fast forward, of course, like the two moments I viscerally remember. The first was the margin calls, because those came before the layoffs at Dell anyway. And margin call was an explicit afternoon where every single middle manager in Dell that was way highly over leveraged, and we're then like betting on the margins on every single other technology stock.
So Steve, when you say margin call, you're not talking like gross margin. You're talking like people at Dell who were trading on margin.
That's right.
Wow. Okay.
We're betting. That's
right.
Oh boy. That's right. So these are like all of the kind of mid-level sales management and above that had all they were up $4 million on paper, and they were building a brand new house in a great neighborhood. And then one afternoon went from up 4 million to down $500,000 that they didn't have. And so you just saw these folks that were living high on the hog, just like green, legitimately nauseous and running for the bathrooms. And I just remember, because it hit so many people on the same floor, that we were all asking, like, what the hell's going on? Like, what's happening?
There's been food poisoning in the cafeteria.
Totally, because the bathrooms reeked of vomit.
Oh my God.
And so that margin call day was the first big one, was the first big warning shot. And then,
when was that, Steve?
When is
that? Is that 2000 sometime?
Yeah, it's like late 2000, and then layoffs were 2001, and that was notable only in that, on like the way Dell set it up, is they had these floors of like 350 people that were on a floor, and it was all open cubicles, but like you could stand up, and you could look like all the way down to the other end of the building, and you saw like the SVPs all kind of huddling, and then starting to snake out down the aisles, shoulder tapping folks, and all the conference rooms had paper taped up over the glass slits, because they needed 40 different rooms to just be cycling out dozens and dozens and dozens of people that day. And so the first offers had, basically, it was just an offer with a couple of different things that included like non-disparagement, and then the offers, because the press started showing up in the parking lot and doing interviews, then added a clause which was like, will not speak to the press, for like an extra bump of $2,500 or whatever it was.
Man, jeez.
Wow.
But the Dellionaires video, I've tried to track that thing down ever since, and have been unsuccessful. It was it's a doozy.
That Dellionaires.
Somebody took $2,500 to keep that sucker hidden. So here's like in a totally tone deaf layoff experience. So the second startup that I worked at in New York in 2001, after 9/11. I mean, they were going to go out of business. This was clear. And so there were like successive rounds of layoffs. And this is probably like October, November 2001, right? Now, does anybody know what Windows on the World was?
Yeah, no. Yes, definitely. World Trade, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Windows on the World was the restaurant thingy in the top of the World Trade Center. And we had a conference room in this company that was named after various locations in New York, one of which was Windows on the World.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you get what is coming. And the phone system was one of these things where like you would get a phone call, like an inter-office phone call, and it would tell you who was calling you. And they were doing all the layoffs in Windows of the World.
Oh God.
And it was like your phone would ring.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I know. Your phone would ring. You would get a phone call from Windows on the World, and it was like, okay, I know I'm going to go. I'm going to go and become the sacrificial lamb so the company can keep going for another month or something like that.
And this is after 9/11, Dan.
It was after 9/11.
Oh, Jesus, that's so grim.
That's pretty unfortunate.
It was really. I mean, like, all joking aside, it was really pretty
awful. Yeah, awful. Well, it's like one of these things that's like they're just not connecting the dots on like, hey, the optics of this are it's like time to change the name of the conference room.
It's like calling your flagship software product Omicron.
Who would even do that?
Too soon.
Yeah, we were first. God damn it. And I wanted our next version is monkeypox. Matt, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so good timing actually, since you just brought it back around to Oxide. I might get in trouble for this question, but do you guys worry that Oxide is going to suffer the same fate as like Sun and the other pick and shovel companies of the previous bust? I mean, I'm sure you guys have learned the lessons and are doing things differently this time, but at least from my outsider perspective, an Oxide rack seems like it could be today's E10K.
No, well, Matt, I think that's I don't think the metaphor is that great there. And I think
because we're not selling them yet.
Because first we're not selling them yet. I mean, I think that downturns will always punish incumbents to a degree, and I think for startups it becomes an interesting opportunity where in high times, and this is what Sun saw certainly in the late 90s. In high times, people aren't really looking for the low cost option, right? They're fine spending and spending and spending, and business as usual is sort of the safest course. And when startups can survive these downturns, it becomes a huge opportunity where these prospective customers who would normally not really consider what they see as a risky option of doing something other than business as usual, suddenly it's not just interesting, but it's a necessity, right? They need to cut millions or tens of millions of dollars from their IT budgets, and doing things with Dell and HP or incumbent vendors doesn't get you there.
Well, and the .com bust, I think, actually accelerated the rise of open source. Hot take.
Yeah, I think that might be right. I buy
it. Because I think that if you were building, you were talking about the even though Dan in this house we don't speak ill of Scient or whatever God blessed the consultancy
Please
was
speak ill of them. Please do.
I was providing us our Chateau d'Yquem. That was not true in 2002, 2003, 2004, and everyone is building based on x86 and open source because it just the economics are so front and center. I think, Matt, I agree with everything that Adam said. I think that I would also say, a couple of other things. One, we do not know to what degree. I think there's an argument to be made. I'm not sure that I would make it, but there's an argument to be made that that Oxide or something like it is countercyclical in that when people begin to focus on costs, like the cloud computing, renting all of your compute doesn't make a lot of economic sense. So I think there's a fundamental.
AWS isn't going to be 10 times cheaper just because it's a bust.
No, I don't think so. Well, and I think that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. And I think that we know that like price reductions on the cloud have basically stopped, especially in an inflationary environment, which is also a weird spin on things that definitely did not exist in the .com bust. And then I think that the one, two, I think that also what Adam was saying about startups, it's actually to a certain degree, it is easier because the absolute numbers you're building on are so low. You're not actually trying to preserve, we don't have an install base of tens of thousands of customers who are now reevaluating their decisions. Indeed, to the contrary, we've got a lot of targets out there that are looking at that are waking up to VMware possibly being acquired by Broadcom, right? Which is
right. Where 2 weeks ago or a month ago, the idea of shaving 5% of their IT spend was sort of not that important to them. Maybe we're suddenly saying, actually, maybe we do need to look at that AWS bill and think about how we're paying for VMware and imagining how those prices might increase in the face of an acquisition or whatever.
Now, that said, I don't believe that anything is. I think sometimes people believe they're countercyclical, truly countercyclical. I think it's really hard to be truly countercyclical. I think that a bust tends to hurt everybody. I don't know. Maybe liquor is actually truly countercyclical.
All right. Okay. New startup idea within the company. Got it.
No, but I doubt it. Actually, I mean, I doubt it. I think that like the hard alcohol that I am that one would drink in the bust surely is got lower margin than the Chateau d'Yquem you drank in the boom. I think that a bust is in that regard is not necessarily in anyone's best interest, which is part of the reason. And actually, I'm kind of curious what those of us who lived through it, what kind of stuck with you from the .com boom and bust. Certainly, one thing that stuck with me is one: we are definitely not in a bust-proof industry, obviously, and indeed we are arguably more vulnerable to irrational exuberance. And two, it's like busts are not great, that booms are not great and busts are not great. And that you ideally want to keep things cooler on the way up so they don't get as frozen on the way down. That basically both of these extremes result in misallocation of resources. And
also oscillating overcorrection in both directions is truly catastrophic as it continues to run further and further away from like a bias level.
Right. And you will absolutely have, it'd be interesting to kind of take a poll of folks, are we headed into a bust and how deep is this thing going to be? So actually, I'll put that out there as a question. Adam, what's
my takeaway from the previous bust?
Yeah, do you feel that we are, one, what are your takeaways? And two, do you feel that we're headed into something that's going to be as deep, or what do you think it's going to look like?
I think it's going to be deep. I think it's going to be really deep in terms of perhaps like the golden era of venture. Maybe that's a wrong way to think about it, but just in terms of the proliferation of startups doing interesting things, startups doing things that are misinformed or whatever. But I think that there's going to be a deep contraction there. There's also going to be a reversal in sort of the founders' rights, where I think as capital dries up, we're going to see less and less founder-friendly activities and much more cold financial decisions around these smaller companies. And
let the record reflect that we are not one of these crazy companies that has like super voting shares.
No, totally. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Right. Where founders have outsized privileges, not one that I would ever work for, to be clear. Like signing up for that kind of thing is a little nutty for both investors and employees. So yeah, I think it's going to be deep, and I think that I agreed with what you're saying, that like being cool and being connected with the customer throughout what you do is that lodestar that I think has guided people through both boom and bust.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're going to have to stay connected, and I think that then also we're all going to have to stay nimble, because I think things are going to probably change quite a bit, and I think that you're going to, once expectations really start to shift, and I think that it's very hard to predict is the other thing I would say. I don't know that other than I think that things will change, and I do think it's going to be deep, because I think it's going to be broader. I think that unlike the .com bust, which really affected tech very, very deeply, and the rest of the economy kind of not so much, I kind of think we're headed into both. I think that tech is going to be adversely affected, and I think we've got a lot of built up. The fact that there's all this inflationary pressure, not just inflationary pressure, Jesus, it's like legit hardcore inflation, I think is going to make this bust different.
The human consequence I think I worry about maybe too much is these folks who have been drawn in by these hacker accelerators or learn to code quick kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think they're just going to be left with nothing, right? They're going to be taking this plunge into a new career, going out west and buying their pick and their shovel, and then ending up with nothing. I don't know. I just feel like there's been a lot of false promises. I have less sympathy for the folks who have jumped onto the crypto bandwagon, but I think there's going to be a lot of lost wealth and for folks who couldn't necessarily sustain a deep loss.
I think you're absolutely right. I also think that in this long boom, we've been a bit too focused on mammon, honestly. And I don't know. I think for me, I feel that during the dot-com boom, everybody got greedy, and including me. I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like anyone was really immune. There was a lot of greed, a lot of Dellionaires. Steve Dell was definitely not alone in that. I don't know what we would call them at Sun, but they. I feel that in the bust, it was kind of a reminder of the things that were actually important, and not focusing as much on the reminding me why I got into this. I didn't get into this to get rich, and the dot-com bust helped.
Yeah, mission accomplished, right?
Mission accomplished. Good news.
Right. Remember those stock options you didn't sell?
Did sell, and I actually, all of my dot-com winnings I backed into a biotech company that promptly went out of business. So that was
nice.
Yeah, I had a loss carry forward that I was taking on my taxes for a very, very, very long time. And the people I know that actually made money, persistent money, off the dot-com boom, did so because they left tech early, because they didn't like it to begin with, and they somehow were just ironically, they were satisfied with their outsized winnings, so they just left. And then those folks made a lot of money. Those are the only ones I know who made money. Most everyone else, I think, got kind of washed out. And then Adam, any advice for folks? I mean, if someone was asking us, all right, based on what we knew then, what should people do for the next couple of years? How long is this going to take, and what should they do?
Yeah, I think a couple of years is probably right. 2-3 years, feels. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's going to. Maybe in 5 years we're going to see that as hugely optimistic. When right now it feels pessimistic. I mean, much like I did in March 2020, when I was predicting how long this thing was going to happen. So yeah, I think that's the right kind of time frame. And I think you're right. Finding the things that matter. I mean, certainly if you're in it for the money, disabusing yourself of that, and finding the folks you want to work with on the stuff you want to work on. And making sure that, I mean, maybe it's too late for this, but not spending the stock options that you hadn't sold yet.
Yeah.
And what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think that, and I just think I do not recommend buying the dips. I mean, I think that there's this kind of cryptocurrency idea that this is all going to come back, and it's I think a lot of this is going to be. It's going to be down for a while, I think, and we'll see. Maybe not. I don't think it's necessarily in anyone's best interest for it to be down for a while, so I don't necessarily think I want that. But I think that there's going to be a lot of things that need to be corrected from an asset allocation perspective that we're going to be enduring.
I think that's right.
Dan, you've had your hand up. Maybe you give us kind of our closing thoughts here.
Okay. Well, it's funny. I was going to talk about the question that was asked earlier about oxide, but your question also ties to the same period in time, you being a student of economics and history. 1982 was when Paul Volcker finished cranking up the Fed rates to kill the inflation part of the 1970s stagflation.
Yeah.
Gee, who started around that time as a company?
Yeah, that's interesting, but because that is actually an interesting question. I mean, I know, and I saw Tom here earlier. I mean, 82
Sun started then.
I know Sun started then.
Yeah.
82, though, is really bad. From the 82-83 recession is gnarly.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. Yeah. I mean, Sun, a bunch of companies started in 82, 83, 84.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that, party like it's 1982. I mean, right now, I think the Fed's trying. Right now, the Fed is trying to make it like 1994. Okay, we're just going to keep bumping half point, and it's going to land softly. I hope it works. I don't know if it will, but get ready for possible craziness. And both of the other bubble bursts you talked about, my own life, it was like, well, we had some things we needed to get done, and well, shit, the economy's going to hell, but we still got to do them. If you can find a way, make sure you still got to do it. Take care of yourself and take care of your family. I moved coasts in 2001, and we moved house in 2009. We took a small loss on our old house, but we got a new one at a relatively discounted price compared to what the neighbors had paid for theirs. And just make sure you're taking care of the things that you need to take care of, and don't let economic fear. You got to take it into account, but don't let it like completely scare you off.
That's a good point, Dan. Because we bought our house in December of 2008, and after being a housing, I mean, as Adam was saying earlier, I was calling the top of this thing since 2003, and I was like, well, I've got to buy, because like I got a kid that needs to go to kindergarten, a kid that is graduating from high school next week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, let's get all the way there. Let's actually see the diploma in hand, please. But I was convinced at the time. I'm like, well, this is not good. And this thing is going to continue to lose value for a couple of years, but this is what we have to do. And as it turns out, like we ended up kind of accidentally timing it better than we intended. But I think that's a very good point. Just not let the fear consume you, and you've got to do what you need to go do. And to not, it'll be okay. It'll be bad, but it'll be okay.
I watched my dad survive Neutron Jack as a GE lifer.
Oh God! Yeah, you got to give him Lights Out. I saw Bezos was tweeting about Lights Out as well. It's such a terrible book. A terrible person. Great book. Theo, you had your hand up.
Yeah. So takeaways from the .com boom that stuck with me are a deep appreciation for brown liquor and cigars. That's who I enjoy those today, and they're still affordable, so that's fantastic. I would say that this downturn is going to be inconsistent across industries, I think.
Yeah.
And it'll last about 3 years. I don't think that the inflationary pressures on that is going to change the timeline, but it'll certainly change the gravitational effect of it. And I think that the big unknown for me is that the supply chain has not been rectified, and I don't know how that's going to interplay with everything. That's something we've never really seen, this prolonged supply chain problem.
Yeah, agreed. It is weird. And I mean, obviously something we've had a very sharp eye on at Oxide and have gotten ahead of for the things that we need to get ahead of it on. But if the supply chain problems can rectify themselves, that would be really nice.
That'd be super great.
I 14-month waiting list for a car.
Right. And that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, I wonder. But although, Theo, maybe your point of this being inconsistent. So do you think that this could be it's kind of I think Truman had that line that it's a recession when your neighbor loses their job, but a depression when you lose yours.
Correct.
And if is this going to be inconsistent, and are we going to see, and I mean, I think you were arguing this has happened since the pandemic, where you've got some people who are really, really struggling, but others that aren't.
Yeah. It's just going to be a huge shakeup.
Yeah.
I think the best advice for trying to stay safe economically is to figure out if your company that you work for and your role even within that company are marginal or not to the company or even to like the whole economy. Like, are you making something that people will still need?
Josh, you need to be reassured that you are not marginal at Oxide.
I mean, I would, if you could print a small certificate that I could stick on my desk.
It's recorded, we got this call recorded.
That would help me.
The proclamation of non-marginality.
Yeah, the last thing, Brian, I'd like to leave folks with too is I think in these times it becomes really easy to focus on yourself and focus on your own family, and I think just casting an eye a little bit beyond that to the folks in your community where your time and your money can still be helpful in helping other people and impacting their lives, and also investing in the change you want to see, whether that's political donations or changing your 401k so that it's not invested in oil and ammunition and things like that. So, certainly taking care of what's close at hand, but thinking about those around you who you can still help.
Did you have an oil and ammunition position that you recently unwound?
He swapped it out for crypto.
This is what my wife does, actually. So her organization, As You Sow, ranks investments, and it turns out a lot of the Oxide 401k is invested heavily in tobacco and oil and
the subjugation of foreign nations.
It turns out it's really easy to sort of click the defaults and be investing in things that sort of preclude the future rather than investing in it. So
get out of oil, but stay in tobacco, because I smoke a lot of cigars now.
You're long tobacco. Okay, gotcha.
All right, on that.
Actually, well, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I actually think that's really good advice. It's like, look, my big takeaway from the .com bust was, if something looks too good to be true, it is too good to be true.
Yeah.
And if something doesn't make any sense to the layperson as an idea, then it's probably a bad idea. I mean, if you stick to things that seem like they make sense, I work at Oxide, so I'm biased, but we make computers. People are going to continue to buy computers. I'm not terribly worried. But if you work at Boo.com or Flues or something, and you're like, this is stupid,
Yeah, no, there is definitely something to that. And I think also, take good notes, because those who are kind of coming up during this period of time, in 20 years, you're going to be on a Twitter space or Shout Cloud. What was that called, Matt? Whatever that was, whatever the Shout Cloud is of 2040. You be regaling
the Neuralink continuum.
Exactly.
It'll be a metaverse therapy room.
That's right. You're going to be, and you yourself will be recounting tales of the bust of 2022 to ? All right. Well, hey, on that note, this has been a lot of fun. Always fun to reminisce about the bust. Hoping that this one doesn't affect people too adversely, other than the crazy stuff that we want to affect adversely. So, Ryan Breslow, talking to you. Other than Ryan Breslow. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks.